All right, so today we're going to be going over three different systems. We're going to go over our muscular system, we're going to go over our respiratory system, as well as our circulatory system. So, go ahead, pull up your notes just like before. So remember, you're going to go on to Schoology. There's a red folder there that says interactive notes, and that's where you're going to find your body system notes. So we're going to continue to work on this, and then next week you'll go ahead and submit it. So let's go ahead and get started. So our muscular system is very straightforward. We have muscles all throughout our body. So you have half of a little guy over here on the right, and you can see that the muscles, cover everything from our head all the way down to our toes. And so when we're thinking about our muscles, our major function for our muscles is to work with our skeleton so that way we can move. Okay, so whether it's physically moving, so like moving our arms and moving our legs, or whether it's like our heart that's moving, or even our digestive system, okay, all of them are going to aid in movement. And so something we also need to remember is that, our muscles attach to our skeleton through tendons. So all of our, skeleton has anchor points where those muscles can attach. And so, not only that, we also have several different types of muscle. So something else that I wanted to go over with y'all. I scroll down here to the bottom, okay, and unfortunately my camera's, covering up a little bit of it. So we have different types of muscle. Okay, so right here I have three different types. So I have cardiac muscle, and cardiac muscle is exactly what it sounds like. It's only found in our heart. We also have skeletal muscle. That's usually what we think about when we think of the muscle system. So those are the muscles that are attached to our skeleton. And then we have another type of muscle called smooth muscle. So smooth muscle typically lines our organs that have to have things move. So for example, in our digestive system, that's all lined with smooth muscle. And so that's, what pushes our food. And, when our food changes to different types of products, that pushes it through our digestive system and also allows us, to make sure it's digested and absorb all those nutrients. So if we look at these three pictures, we can see that they all three look differently. So they all have nuclei, which are these little purple circles that are here, and they're all kind of in strips. But if I look at my cardiac muscle, I can see some of these strips are attached, and we call that branching. And so my cardiac muscle, because the heart has to pump all together, like all those muscle fibers need to be connected so they can communicate with each other. My skeletal muscle, it's all, very straight, very parallel, and it's all stacked on each other. And that way, you have more strength, whenever you're trying to contract or move your skeleton, because our skeleton is pretty heavy when you think about it. And then our smooth muscle, very short, little, thin cells, and that's okay because sometimes, it helps, make that muscle smooth and, just contract enough just to move things along. So let's go ahead and write a brief description about each of these up here. Okay, so first, okay, I have cardiac muscle. Okay, so this one's branching with many nuclei, and it's only found in the heart. So one of the things about cardiac muscle, we cannot control the contractions of the cardiac muscle. It's going to happen regardless. And so we call this involuntary contractions, okay, because we cannot control it. It's going to beat, unless there's something wrong with your heart, it's going to keep on beating. Next, we have skeletal muscle. Okay, and so skeletal muscle, are very long, stacked fibers, and they attach to our skeleton. Okay. So these are the muscles that we can move, and so we call that voluntary movement. You could say movement or contractions. Okay, so voluntary movement. So we can choose to move those. So if you want to go outside and go work out or go for a jog, you're using your skeletal muscles, and you can control that. Lastly, remember, we have our smooth muscle. Man, I cannot type. Okay, so smooth muscle are short fibers, okay, found lining inner organs. Okay, so such as digestive system. Okay, and I'm going to scroll this so that way my little camera is not blocking that. Okay, all right, so found lining inner organs such as your digestive system. Okay, and again, we can't control whether or not, we're going to digest what we eat. Like once we eat, it has to be digested. And so this is another involuntary contraction. And so when we talk about the digestive system, we'll talk about some of those movements, that happen within our stomach and within our intestines. So go ahead, finish this up. If you need a pause, then go ahead and do that. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next body system, which is our respiratory system. So our respiratory system has to do with the exchange of gases. And so we have gases come in, so we have oxygen that we need to breathe, and then our body, just through natural processes, forms a waste gas called carbon dioxide. And so you probably remember when we talked about cellular respiration, we're breathing in oxygen because we need it for cellular respiration, and then we produce carbon dioxide to be exhaled. So that's what our respiratory system does. It exchanges that carbon dioxide for fresh oxygen so that way our body can continue. And so that's going to be our primary function that's right here. Okay, so our primary function is to take oxygen from breathing in and get rid of carbon dioxide through exhaling. Okay, so we breathe in oxygen, breathe out carbon dioxide. Okay, so how that interchange occurs, we have these little things called alveoli, and these things are awesome. So essentially, as we're breathing into our lungs, these little alveoli will allow blood to come and pick up the oxygen as well as drop off that carbon dioxide. Okay, so we just need to remember that that major function is to take in oxygen from breathing in and to get rid of carbon dioxide through exhaling. So if I come down here, again, if I'm going too fast, feel free to pause. Okay, so if I come down here, I can see several different major organs that have to do with my respiratory system. And we can get more detailed than this, but these are just some of the major ones. So we know that we have our lungs. So our lungs are filled with bronchial tubes and alveoli, and that's where, the air is going to come in to be exchanged. So you may have heard of these terms before, especially maybe those of you that, have asthma or know somebody who has asthma. Asthma is the inflammation of these bronchial tubes. And so when you take an inhaler, it relaxes those tubes. That way more air can come in. We also have our diaphragm, which is the muscle right underneath our lungs. So as our diaphragm comes down, it's going to pull in air. So almost like a syringe, we're going to, inhale as the diaphragm expands. We also have our trachea. So our trachea is our windpipe, and you can actually feel it. So if you push down on your throat, you can feel that windpipe. Guys, those of you that have an Adam's apple, okay, that's going to be your larynx. That's your voice box. So as you're talking, you can feel your larynx, which houses your vocal cords. You can feel that vibrating. And then our pharynx is just the cavity, where air is coming in, in our mouth and our nose. So those are just several of the major organs. So I'm going to go ahead over here. I'm going to type about the lungs in particular and the diaphragm. And I don't know why my mouse does not want to work. Okay, there we go. Okay, so hopefully as I type, this will move over. Okay, so lungs. Okay, so lungs, okay, house the bronchi and alveoli for gas exchange. And the diaphragm is a muscle, that expands and allows air to enter the lungs. Okay, so those are the two major things. Those are the two things that I really, really want y'all to know. Okay, so that our lungs, they house the bronchi and the alveoli, and then our diaphragm is that muscle underneath the lungs, underneath the rib cage, that expands and air comes in. All right, so our last thing that we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about our circulatory system. So our circulatory system has to do with our heart as well as all of our vessels. And I have something here about red blood cells and how, they work with the respiratory system to transport oxygen all throughout our body. I'm also going to post another video, that way you can see how that actually happens, because that's really neat. So if we look at our circulatory system, so here's another diagram. We could see that, our heart is a really large organ that we have, that allows, the blood to transport all throughout our body. And we have vessels everywhere. We have them, going through our arms, our legs. We have some major ones coming down the center of our body. We have some up in our head, like you're going to find blood vessels everywhere. And that's because we need to have that exchange of oxygen and nutrients. And so when we're talking about our cardiovascular system, okay, so the main function, okay, is to transport gases and nutrients throughout the body. Okay, that's our main function. Okay, that's what the circulatory system does. It's going to be our transportation system, so gases can circulate all throughout and nutrients can also circulate all throughout. Okay, so, a couple of the major organs, we have our heart. Okay, so this is our muscle that causes blood to be pumped through the body. And then we have a lot of vessels. Okay, so we have veins, arteries, and capillaries. Okay, so all of these vessels are essentially the tubes that blood is going to travel through. Okay, so blood's going to be traveling all throughout our body. So we need to figure out some of the differences between our veins, arteries, and capillaries. So capillaries are very, very thin little blood vessels that either surround organs or could be even found right under the skin. So like if you take your hand and you push on it, you push on the skin, and when you release, you'll notice that your skin is a lighter color. And that's because you compress the blood out of those capillaries, and then all of a sudden the blood is rushing in, and that's what gives your skin that color again. So also, capillaries are the reason why when you get a paper cut, sometimes you bleed. It's because you've sliced those capillaries that are right underneath your skin. So let's go ahead and talk about veins and arteries really quick. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and come on up here. Okay, so I have right here a cross section of a microscope slide that has an artery and a vein. And you can see they look very different. My artery is almost perfectly circular, and it looks like that wall from the middle all the way to the outside is really thick. My vein is kind of floppy looking, like, I don't know what shape that is. And the wall is just a little bit thinner. It's kind of hard to see, but that wall is definitely thinner. So let's go ahead and compare the two. So if we're going to compare a vein to an artery, okay, so veins carry blood to the heart, okay? And so because it's going back to the heart, it's already gone all throughout our body. And so you've probably gone to the doctor and they've probably checked your blood pressure. Okay, so veins actually don't have a very high blood pressure. And so that's because, like if we're thinking about our veins, they're coming back to the heart. They didn't just leave the heart. And so there's not much pressure, for them to travel, all the way back to the heart. It's going to just naturally go that way anyway. Okay, so veins carry blood to the heart. Okay, so and have a thinner vessel wall. Okay, because of that lower blood pressure. Arteries, however, carry blood away from the heart. Okay, so it's carrying oxygenated blood. Okay, so it contains the oxygen and has a thicker wall. Okay, because as our heart's pumping, okay, that means the pressure is really high for the blood to move from the heart. And so the artery walls have to be thick enough in order to sustain that pressure that the heart is giving. And so if we look right here, I have a little diagram right here of a heart, and we could see that the heart is multi-chambered. So that means that there's a lot of spaces here that the blood can flow in. And so if we looked at a complete diagram, we would be able to see that some of these major vessels are going to and from the lungs, and some of them, are going to the rest of our body. And that's because our heart needs to make sure the blood is going to the lungs to pick up the oxygen, and then also to drop off any carbon dioxide, that we don't need. And then it also needs to pump the blood to the rest of our body so that way we get those nutrients and we get the oxygen that we need. So hopefully this was clear, and hopefully I didn't talk too fast. Just pause and rewind the video if you need to, and let me know if you have any questions.